I get very frustrated when I hear a lot of this stuff, because to me, when you're facing a global pandemic with a new virus about which we still know very little, and it's killing so many people, particularly our elderly and vulnerable members of society, you need clarity and you need firm decision-making, and it's got to be kept simple, because otherwise people don't understand what's going on. And all we're hearing this morning is, following Boris Johnson's address last night, is that people are basically now all pouring out and they're ignoring the lockdown. To me, I'm just a layman, but to me, given that we're no nearer defeating this virus than we were before the lockdown, this can only lead to innumerable more infections and therefore more death. Am I wrong?
Well, Piers, let me just take a step back, if I might. I understand your anger and your concern, which of course is something which a lot of people will share. But I think at the moment we do have to understand that when we get very, very virulent with our own sort of virus of media, there is a very risk that actually we undermine any kind of public health by actually really causing quite a lot of mental ill health. So I think we have to be a little bit controlled. Whatever we might think politically, I think at the moment, and I'm not a supporter of the government, as you probably know, I'm certainly not supportive of what happened to the health service before this epidemic. I think we have to be very clear, particularly about one thing which you kind of implied, if I may say so, that the scientists have been giving inappropriate advice. Actually, we don't know exactly what advice has been given.
Well, no, let me just clarify that. What I said was that they've clearly been giving very different advice to most scientists advising other governments. I only base that on, for example, the issue of quarantining people coming into this country from other countries with coronavirus. We are one of only 10% of the world's countries that haven't been doing some form of testing or quarantining of people coming in.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, the shambles over testing was something which I asked about in Parliament before the whole thing started. In fact, on the first day this was announced, and I didn't get an answer from the health minister at the time. So I'm fully.
But that's my point. My point, though, is that these experts are clearly giving advice which is different. Given that we've been blindly following the advice according to the government, my question is not that they're wrong. My question is, at the moment, it looks like we've been following very different advice to many other countries, and we have a death toll which is higher than almost every other country. I'm doing the maths, and it looks bad for our advice.
Piers, can I just say one thing? I'm sure my colleague Tim Spector will definitely agree with me that actually we as scientists are in very great contact with people all over the world all the time. And certainly the people who've been giving advice to the government are not doing it in isolation in Britain. We've been looking very carefully at what's happening in Israel, in Singapore, in Korea, in a whole range of places, Australia, places which have had very, very good results, actually, from what has been an appalling pandemic. And I'm sure that Professor Spector would agree with me on that.
Professor Spector, do you agree with him on that?
Well, I'm sure scientists like ourselves do follow what's going on around the world. It's an international business, it's not a national one. What we don't know is what the scientists that are sort of kept secret are actually telling the government, because they're just seen to be blamed for everything at the moment.
Yeah, you see, I don't understand why we can't see the science. Because to me, normally you would hide this kind of thing. If you're involved in a conventional war with the Nazis or whoever, we've just seen the 75th anniversary of D-Day, so it's in our minds. When you don't want the enemy to hear what your thinking is, I get that. This is a virus. You can't see it, smell it, feel it. It has no feelings, it doesn't care about our deliberations. Why can't we see what our scientists are advising? Because, again, I'm not saying these scientists don't know what they're talking about. I'm just saying what they're advising appears to be, whether it's about testing, whether it's about lockdown, whether it's about airports, it appears to be different to the advice being given in many other countries. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it ought to be more transparent. I think for example, the French have got a 1 metre rule rather than a 2 metre rule. So it'd be good to actually discuss the evidence, why one country's experts are saying one thing more than another. You've got similar rules on quarantines on airports. You've got other countries poorer than ours doing swab testing at airports with 30-minute tests that would be much more effective than quarantine. But I'm particularly worried that we're telling people to stay alert, but we're not really giving them the information about the virus they need. we're way behind the curve in this country on defining what the disease is. We still have this idea that it's just about having fever, it's just about having a cough or shortness of breath, whereas we have this COVID symptom app, which has been out there for about 5 weeks. 3.1 million British people, about 1 in 20 of the population, are using it. And that's telling us that we have about 15 symptoms of this disease, showing you when you're infected.
I mean, I had this. So a week ago, I started developing breathlessness, quite unusual, never had it before, thought it might be hay fever. Then I got a cough and I felt unusually lethargic. And I rang a respiratory guy that had treated me a year ago for various things, bronchitis and so on. And he was very concerned. And he said, look, these are 3 symptoms potentially of COVID. I think you've got a 5 to 10% chance of having it. And he made me take a test, which as a key worker, I was entitled to do. Unfortunately, I was negative. But he also mentioned, as you just did, that there are all sorts of different symptoms now popping up. And that it's not, I didn't have a fever, for example, but he said that's no longer a yardstick for COVID-19.
Well, it is if you go to NHS 111, you can't get you can't be told to isolate or get a test. If you just say if you don't have fever and cough, and our data on 3 million people is showing us that in those first few days, most people don't have fever and cough when they're infectious. So it's all about telling people the truth. And we know that the CDC in America now have 8 symptoms on their list. The World Health Organization have a bigger list. We're just behind the curve.
Yeah, we are. And Lord Winston,
giving people the tools they need to be alert and understand what's going on. And that's why we need, tools like this app to be used so we can actually...
I completely agree with you. Lord Winston, you're an expert in so many fields. Just on this one, I mean, the most pressing issue, it seems to me, we can all argue about government and so on, but ultimately we've got to try and beat this virus. And it seems to me we only beat it if we develop a vaccine that's successful, or we develop an antibody test which is 100%, which can tell us who's had it and you get immunity, and we've established you get immunity, or we develop a treatment as we did with HIV, for example, which means that we can stop so many people dying. Unless we get one of those 3 things, none of which we have at the moment, then we've got a long battle with this virus. Am I right to think that?
Regrettably, I think you are right, although, of course, we might be very, very fortunate with a quick breakthrough with perhaps a vaccine, though it does seem extremely unlikely. After all, coronaviruses have been around for a long time, one of which is the common cold. We still don't actually have a vaccine for the common cold, for example. Admittedly, there's never been quite the kind of investment that's really been needed. So hopefully, maybe if we did pour a great deal more attention at this, we might get somewhere. There are all sorts of potential strategies for getting a vaccine. I can list at least 30 of them, but I don't think it really helps. The truth is, this is a very, very unusual infection, and a very serious one. And it's not just the chest, it actually affects virtually all the tissues in the body in different ways. So the symptoms are quite numerous, and that's one of the problems. Though, of course, fortunately, the common one actually is the chest one, and that's the one that's usually most urgent and most important, with a few exceptions.
Would you, with all you know about this, would you be relaxing lockdown rules?
Sending people back to work,
would you have changed
people back to school?
Let's forget the politics of this. I really don't care about the politics. It's about leadership. Boris Johnson had a very clear message: stay at home. He's now abandoned that for control the virus and basically tacitly encourage people to go out again. Would you be doing that if you were running the country?
Very carefully at what's happened in other countries. I understand in Wuhan, for example, they're starting to see a second peak when they've certainly relaxed some of the rules. So that's one of the issues that we will have to be very much aware of. But to be fair, I'm not sure about Tim, but certainly I don't have the sort of data at my fingertips, or indeed the explanation of those data, which would really allow me to make that presumption. I would be very cautious about releasing people from lockdown at the moment, because I think we would have to do it extremely gently, which of course is effectively what the Prime Minister was trying to say.